Again, hello and welcome to What's Up AEC. Actually, my name is Ayman Ayoub. I am the Vice President of Marketing and Sales here at IronOrbit. In this series of roundtable discussions, we'd like to bring you interesting topics from the AEC space and why they're important to you as a professional in the AEC industry. And also give you a heads up on things, head your way in the future and how you need to be ready for them. So, this forum will bring together some of the greatest minds in AEC. We hope to do so in the AEC community, along with great minds working on the innovation, application of technology created, and to make your work more efficient, easier and more productive. This is the ultimate objective for this particular forum. Before we expand more on today's episode in particular and the questions that we had for you guys, I'd like to take just a few moments for those guests to introduce themselves. They all know who's participating before we jump into the topics right away. So let's kick it off with Jimmy. Jimmy, want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Great to meet you guys. So my name's Jimmy Rotella. I'm a senior solutions architect with Nvidia. My specific role focuses primarily on our vGPU product. However, actually prior to coming to Nvidia, I came from the customer side. I had spent my entire career previously basically doing IT for architecture firms specifically. So very familiar with all the workloads, applications, and IT struggles that come along with some of those things, especially in a virtualized world. So great to meet you guys.
Perfect. Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you for the introduction over here. I also have Mike Albitz with us here on this conversation. Mike, good morning to you.
Good morning. My name is Mike Albitz with MSA-Professional Services. We're a Midwest engineering architecture firm. I've been with our company for a little over 20 years now. Pretty much so done every job in our IT department. Same as Jimmy, seen pretty much so every challenge that possibly could be thrown our way and had to figure out our way around it.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you, Mike. I'm very excited actually to run a discussion with you today as well. And thank you for joining this particular roundtable. Tyler, good morning to you. How you doing, sir?
Good morning. Sorry, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
So, Tyler, I know that you also work for Ulteig Engineers. You want to take a minute to introduce yourself and, what do you do for Ulteig? How long you've been with these guys?
Yeah. Ulteig Engineers is an engineering services across the U.S. We have about 12 locations. I'm the enterprise applications and systems lead. Basically, what that means is long title for I sit between the business and IT, and I try to help facilitate, technology interaction between the business and better use for VDI fits right in that bucket. So I've been with Ulteig for 2 years now, and one of those years we've rolled out IronOrbit for VDI usage, and it's been going well.
We have Mr. Jay Tuss as well. Jay, good morning to you. Thank you for joining.
Good morning. Sorry, I don't have video right now, but I'm an IT guy with the regional engineering firm TD&H Engineering. I'm not actually with IronOrbit yet. I'm still looking at it. So that's what I'm just kind of looking in today.
Well, thank you for joining, Jay, and we truly appreciate your participation today on this forum. And remember, this forum has nothing to do with IronOrbit customers or not. This is a forum where we aspire actually to get to connect the dots. One of the things that we came to realize over the past couple of years, specifically during the pandemic, is that there's a lot of space, a lot of void out there, specifically in the AEC industry when it comes to information sharing and when it comes to sharing experiences and sharing challenges across the board. It's such a beautiful industry. I myself am an engineer. I haven't practiced engineering in more than 15 years now, so I can't claim to remain an engineer anymore. But yes, when we look deeper into that industry, when we try to go out and find a lot of resources or kind of figure out what are the expertise or the common attributes that are across the industry, we found out there's a lot of space that needs to be filled in terms of valuable information, information sharing, experience sharing across the board. So one of the things that we're trying to do with this particular forum is bridge that particular gap and get people to know each other and to understand deeper the issues and concerns and aspirations. And actually future strategies that this particular industry is interested in and cares about the most. And speaking of such, I'd like to open the discussion actually with a very valid question. Coming up with a crazy year like 2020. I mean, it was a crazy year. It doesn't matter how you look at it. It could be in a good way or in a bad way, but I think crazy is a good title to address that particular 2020 year. So the first question that really pops on my mind over here, what's burning right now in the AEC industry, right? So what are you guys trying to figure out come out of this year? Is it more like should we remain working remote or go back to office? Is it the lessons you learned across the year, the challenges that you came across, how you become better prepared? Or unfortunately, God forbid, we come across a similar experience in the near future or not. What's on your mind? What's burning right now? And I like to address that question specifically to Mike, to expand on a little bit here.
Well, I guess recovering from what happened in 2020 is kind of a big thing for us, just to try to come back to a normal. We're still, I don't think we're going to get much more than 30 to 40% of our folks to actually come back into the office. I think this work from home is going to be a much larger event than what we thought it was going to be initially. The people were willing to put up with, say, a Microsoft VPN or a Cisco VPN in the initial part of the pandemic, and now they're realizing that they want much faster performance on their desktops and to do their job in a much better fashion. So I think that's a big one for us. Security is huge for us right now. Just trying to secure all of our every single way into our building, which we used to have fewer and fewer of them. So I kind of see that we're moving more toward a more service-based and more, we're going to become security police officers, basically, to keep all the bad guys out and securing our our network and making sure that we're able to continue on as a business. Those are the big ones for right now that I can think of.
Very interesting. Did you have any security threats back in 2020?
We've had security threats, I mean, every year I've been here. Most of the security threats kind of go around our users more than our perimeter. We do pretty well. It's when something gets through and they click on something that they shouldn't. That's usually when we get into trouble. We can control a lot of other stuff from getting in, but those are our issues. We're really not too bad. We're a Pan0 shop too, so we don't have a lot of the issues like a Microsoft file server would have. We're a little bit more secure there, and knock on wood, of course, because I don't want to jinx us, but we've been pretty lucky that way.
That's good to know. Tyler, are you guys facing something similar as well? Is security a concern at pretty much at Ulteig right now, or?
Security is always top of mind for us in our industry. I think that's kind of across the board. You hear that a lot now at any group you meet up with in the AEC world. I think it's just something that's table stakes. And if you want certain work, depending on public, private sector, you just need to have certain regulations in place or security infrastructure in place. So, and for me, that's not a huge area for me, just because I just don't deal with that every day. But I would say, as far as the business side and getting work done, VDI and allowing the VDI infrastructure to handle the kind of workloads we're now trying to push towards it is a greater need. So like 3D is huge, and that's exploding for us. We have a huge section of our work that does modeling and studies, so that requires an enormous workload, and just putting everyone on VDI is proving to be a challenge, and just making it more efficient to work that way. People still often will try to use their local machines, which is, as we all know, very inefficient, especially through VPN, especially on the million other factors that go into trying to consider there. I would say a great portion of IT's future thinking is also on what happens after the remote work 2.0 or whatever you want to call it after the pandemic, I think knowledge sharing and information sharing is going to be much harder. And the way, because we're in engineering services, well, we're in engineering services, but I think most people here might be, we are only as strong as the people that create and share that knowledge and send it out to clients. So how do we foster that kind of thinking and sharing now that we're all in different offices, remote, no one's coming back in? That's a challenge that we're thinking about right now.
I'm a little bit curious, are there any data regulatory bodies or compliance kind of requirements specific for the AEC industry that you guys are aware of? I don't recall going through one in particular like other industries, right?
I would say for us, we try to adhere as close as we can to SOC 2 Type 2. We're not certified or anything. We've gone through the whole, like, someone's come in, done assessments for us, but we try to adhere as close to that as we can. A lot of we work in the energy sector quite often, so they have pretty high regulations, and as a consultant to the energy sector, they, some of those fall upon us as well.
Exactly, yes, because I remember, Mike, I remember we had customers back in the days who had projects specifically for the US government, and they required for a specific compliance. You guys go through any of similar situations before?
We don't do a whole lot of Department of Defense or even U.S. government work per se. Most of ours is state and local governments, but bigger communities are starting to have more compliance that they want to know our security infrastructure and upfront. They want to know what our disaster recovery plan, what assessments we went through, what we've done to make sure that we're secure. So we have ran across that. It's becoming more prevalent now with our customers. It's the bigger communities: Milwaukee, Madison, St. Paul, Minneapolis, Des Moines, things like that. But the majority of ours are smaller. But it's going to bleed into those smaller communities eventually. It's going to get there. So we just have to be in front of it, and that's what we're doing. Sorry.
No worries. I just wanted to throw out there, I think from my past experiences, the number one thing regarding security was actually more related to just like IP, because of the file sizes and stuff like that you use. If you're working a lot on laptops and things like that remotely, people are typically copying those files over locally that resides on that laptop. When that laptop gets left on a plane, a train, God knows where, you have no idea where that stuff is going. And keeping all of that information in the data center in a centralized location so that people can connect from whatever they want has always been sort of the biggest security issue that I've seen in this space.
Very interesting. Jimmy, speaking of which, and going back to 2020, besides the I've been following your ticker, and besides the stock value of Nvidia that doubled or tripled last year, how are things at Nvidia actually? What are you guys? What's your observations of the past year, and what's your plans for the coming one?
We didn't change focus based on any of this. We had always seen a remote workforce coming. If you look at a lot of analysts and stuff like that, they'll say that this past year has actually accelerated the work from home movement that was inevitably going to happen by, some say, 5 to 10 years. So we've always been working towards giving capability of working remotely with a desktop-like experience being key. People have been working on VDI and working remotely for years. It's just a lot of industries like the AEC space, for instance, because of a lot of what they use, the tools that they use that require GPU acceleration, that require high-end graphics, it wasn't possible on your sort of traditional configurations. So, I mean, we've definitely invested a lot in development because we know that space so well. We come from powering those big workstations that were under your desk traditionally. And we're just moving that sort of resource into the data center.
And one of the things that you guys we came across last year, I came to know about, is the power of your RTX 6000 cards in particular, and how capable these are in GPU accelerated machines. I know that you guys are having newer cards coming out, not to replace the RTX 6000, but also probably to kind of complement the portfolio. Take a minute and talk about the RTX 6000. How did that play a role? Because it did make a big difference to us in providing that for cloud. I'm going to touch base on this in a minute. What are your thoughts about RTX 6000 and the following?
Yeah, absolutely. So you were breaking up a little bit towards the end there, but I think I got the gist of what you're looking for. So yeah, the RTX cards, RTX 6000 and 8000, they're both really powerful, great GPUs. One of the biggest things that they bring to the table is RTX in the data center. You guys probably were familiar with our RTX announcement a few years back. It started out in the GeForce line in the gaming world. Obviously, everything that starts there starts bleeding over into the professional realm. But prior to those RTX cards, the only GPU we had that offered RTX in the data center was actually the T4. But the T4 is a sort of underclocked version of the RTX cards. So good low power card, but not giving you the horsepower that's required for a lot of the architecture engineering apps. So being able to leverage a high-end RTX GPU in the cloud, giving you lots of GPU horsepower, giving you our RT cores for ray tracing, applications that are doing real-time rendering, which they're multiplying every day. The various applications that leverage it because it does it so efficiently when you have the horsepower behind them. But it's been a great tool for the AEC space specifically.
And what's following? What are you guys coming up with now? I think the A40 is coming down the road.
Yeah. So A40 is basically the successor to the RTX 6000 and 8000. So the RTX 6000 and 8000 were basically the same GPU from a compute perspective. The difference only was the amount of frame buffer they had. So there was 6000's 24 gigabytes, 8000's 48. The A40 following that is our newest architecture. So RTX is our Turing generation architecture. A40 is going to be our Ampere generation architecture. So more powerful compute, and the A40 comes in basically only a 48 gigabyte frame buffer variant. So the ability to have more users with higher frame buffer amounts on there, and giving you even more powerful compute resources.
Collaboration was a big challenge actually back in 2020, which is getting collaboration tools worked on these DAS machines, specifically providing them with the horsepower required for a smooth kind of communication all across, back and forth. And one of the observations that we came across was that when you run these machines on a GPU accelerated virtual desktop, it runs much. You run these applications actually on GPU accelerated desktop, it runs much smoother and works much better and finer, I may say, than a non-GPU accelerated one. So was that an element that you guys took into consideration when you were coming up with the A4? That's a question to you, Jimmy. So I was just wondering if that was one of the factors that you guys have considered when you were going into the A4 direction.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I missed the end of your missed the end of your question. Yeah, I mean, so collaboration has obviously always been an issue, especially in the AEC space. It started with just sort of version control in general. How do we make sure people are not working on the floor plan final copy of a copy that's on their laptop that nobody else knows about. First, just taking all of that data and centralizing it, like I talked about earlier, in a VDI environment, it's a great place to start. Bringing that all into one central location so everybody sees everything, they're connecting to it. That data resides right alongside the VM that you're working on. But one of the things that that we've been working on a lot, and some of you may have seen some of our recent announcements about a tool called Omniverse. Omniverse is us sort of taking collaboration to the next level. So it leverages our RTX technology. We've designed it sort of with A40 in mind at the same time, because it's a very powerful GPU and the application is a very powerful collaboration tool, basically giving you capabilities of real-time collaboration in a virtual space, and trying to address the issue that, I mean, I'm sure you guys are all aware of bringing all of these various applications together and making them talk to each other and play well with each other. You may have one person who needs to work in one application to do one task, another person, to work on another application to do another task. You don't want to, give everybody just a hammer to try and do all of their work. Giving them the right tools to do the right job becomes important. So bringing them together and making them work together is something that we've really been trying to enable the remote workforce to do more efficiently.
Some of the notes that I came across, Gartner says that many organizations only had the capacity to handle a small subset of users and weren't prepared to enable all employees for remote work during the pandemic. And that was an observation that came out of Gartner recently. Many companies lacked the required bandwidth to support all users working remotely simultaneously, and others lacked the assets actually, or the licensing, or the different components required to get these guys to operate efficiently. So, questions back to you, Mike. Were you guys caught off guard, and how fast did you respond, and what was your way out of this kind of situation?
We were caught a little bit off guard. Bandwidth, we were fine. We had our main data center has 1 gig by 1 gig coming in with a 500 meg backup that we could turn up. So we were good there. We did have to stand up a couple extra VPN servers in different locations. Panzera helped a lot. I mean, we were well into that we were able to have our data local. The ones that caught us off guard were we really didn't keep tabs on people or folks at home with their home internet. We had some folks that were using cell phones as a hotspot trying to connect to our VPN, and they were trying to open 10, 12, 30 meg files, and it just did not work. When schools closed down and a couple of ladies were stuck at home, and that's kind of our success story with IronOrbit, is that we were able to get them on, stand a Panzera up in IronOrbit, and even with those horrible internet connections, they were still able to work. They were still able to do, one lady was a marketing lady who did a bunch of stuff in InDesign. The other one was an ArcGIS and a CAD user, and even with their cellular internet that they were using, they were able to continue to work. So we were pretty good, and maybe it was because we're a smaller company. I mean, we're under 400 folks, so maybe we got lucky just because of the size that we are. But we were caught off guard, but we were able to, within a couple of days, we had a couple more VPN servers up, a couple more VPN clients pushed out to people, and if they couldn't get into one, they could try. We had 4 different ones, one going to our Madison office, one going to our Des Moines office, and one going to our corporate headquarters.
That's interesting. Tyler, did you guys have pretty much the same experience? I know that you moved to DAS somewhere in 2020, but the question was, did you see this coming before the pandemic, or was it the result of the pandemic, actually, this particular decision?
We were set up pretty well. We like Mike, had to spin up a lot of extra VPN capacity just because of everyone working remotely. We did have our own VDI stood up already before IronOrbit, but we, as part of a DR push and just trying to extend our capabilities into what IronOrbit offered, they were a good partner. So that's what led us to go into IronOrbit. But this was all pre-pandemic, but it did help us a lot, of course, during these times and pushing more people towards using VDI. We still have a struggle with getting people to adopt VDI just because of the nature of, I think that's just how people like to work. It's just VDI is kind of a hard concept for certain people, and sometimes, performance, depending on the application, you just need to work on tweaking, twisting certain knobs to make it function the right way, and that's just a perception thing. But yeah, we had little challenge, I would say. I mean, but like everyone else, there was some challenge during the pandemic.
One of the observations we came across with a recent McKinsey report states that disruption is reshaping the world's largest ecosystem. Obviously, disruptions comes in many forms, in many shapes. Also another report from Deloitte says that most engineering and construction companies continue to face sustained cost and margin pressures. Additionally, despite strong order books, companies are experiencing challenges such as project delays and cancellations, as well as the difficulty obtaining permits and so on and so forth. Also, increases in the procurement costs of materials and equipment continue to kind of stymie many AEC companies in the industry out there. I know a bunch of companies actually who ran into some of these problems. I mean, hands-on, straightforward. They were waiting for some projects to happen to move on with their IT plans, and then these projects were stalled. They didn't, move in as fast as they wanted to, and they were running into a lot of turbulent kind of, I would say, kind of environments over here. So, what do you guys think? And then that's a question specifically for you, Mike, to start with. Did you face any of these challenges, like project delays, cancellations, getting the permits, procurement? Because, procurement was mainly disrupted during this pandemic, right? So
we actually did okay in procuring projects. The ones that we kind of ran into issue with were smaller communities where a lot of their income comes from tourism, people visiting, parking tickets, stuff like that, that they planned on some money that just didn't happen. And to keep clients, we kind of let them off the hook of these projects because they didn't have the money to spend at that time. So we had a couple of issues that way. In the IT terms of our projects that we had going, we actually got more money in the pandemic to keep things going. We had more money in our budget or more money at our disposal to help facilitate a lot of these work from home projects. So we were pretty lucky that way.
how about you guys? Tyler, I know a bunch of customers, a bunch of companies who ran into these challenges. They weren't as fortunate as others, obviously, and I also heard of a lot of mergers and acquisitions, that there was a lot of acquisitions happening in 2020, specifically companies who weren't troubled, going out and acquiring the smaller ones who had their projects canceled or ran into some of these problems. So what's your take on this, Tyler?
Well, fortunately, the sectors we find ourselves in, we align with the water, renewables, power, and infrastructure. So, I mean, of course, those things we were impacted. Every business is impacted. It's just how greatly were you impacted. It depends on what industries you're in, right? And for us, there was impact, but it was smaller than most. We actually grew a lot so far. So we've actually extended our IT capabilities, and like Mike, we've funneled a lot more money into doing remote capabilities, and so we might be an anomaly in that regard. But I know, yeah, like you said, there's a lot of companies out there, and we're one of those companies where we're focused on remote work, and we're always looking for other companies, like you said, to add to our portfolio, and it doesn't matter where they are.
So what's the take here? Was it the bigger companies were able to sustain more, or is it just because of what these companies usually focus on from an industry perspective? So
yeah, I'm not an economic expert, but if you had asked me, I mean, of course, if you look at what the pandemic, what industries it affected, if you're aligned with other industries that, like for us, renewables is a continued focus for the U.S. economy. I mean, there's a lot of money being dumped into it all the time. So for us, it kind of aligns with projects coming in. We have a healthy backlog, but I think. And again, not an economic expert, but if I had to make an educated guess, I would say it's because of where the money is in the economy.
What I've been hearing is we're doing well now. We think we're going to do well in 2021, possibly half of 2022. Then they're worried. They're worried that that's when all the money's going to dry up and the projects are going to start really to slow down from the pandemic, because we really do move at a couple of years behind of the economy, and we're in a good spot now. We had the same thing in 2008, been here long enough, of course, but same thing 2008, 2009, we were doing good, and then about 2010, 2011, it got really, really bad. So that's when we went through that. We're kind of thinking that that's where we're going to end up here in 2023, maybe. And that's why we're kind of keeping an eye on everything that way.
I think some of it too is not necessarily relative to size, but rather a company's nimbleness. Are they able to adapt quickly? Are they able to work with partners to solve their solution quickly and efficiently? That's often really all it comes down to. Now, it is more difficult to steer a larger ship quickly usually, but I mean, I work with large and small companies, some large companies that are able to turn on a dime and some small companies that take forever to change. So it's just about how they can adapt.
That's a very interesting, observation here, Jimmy. So what makes a company able to shift or change direction faster than other? I mean, it's really kind of intriguing to me to know that smaller companies take forever to take a decision and move into change direction, actually. So from your experience, what does it really take?
I mean, I think it varies. It's really just sort of based on the culture of the organization. Whether or not, their leadership and their, employees are able to make changes quickly and efficiently. If that's something that's okay in their culture. Some organizations just are not built on that concept. They're built on doing things the way they've always been done. And that's the biggest obstacle I think that I've seen with any customer.
Very interesting comment too.
Yep.
Well, I think a prime example of this is how quickly and I think it's an industry whole, not just our company, but how quickly we moved to working from home. If you planned that out, how long would it take? I mean, I'm kind of asking everybody, but how long do you think it would really take to push your whole company to be working from home? I would guess it'd be a year or two before we'd get everybody there. And we did it basically overnight. I mean, it was at a snap of a finger and boom, everybody's at home. And I think that was just a challenge that we had to overcome.
I can tell you, I did for a very large architecture engineering firm. It took us about a year to put the whole workforce capable of working remotely. Not even actually doing it, but capable of working remotely.
Yeah, we worked with IronOrbit quite a while before the pandemic hit. We were in negotiations and trying to do proof of concepts and stuff like that, but just the way we moved, it was that slow, and then bam, it changed, and it's like, here's some money, go work with them. And I'm just glad I had the relationships.
Yep.
It is a very, very interesting observation over here. And did you actually have a lot of pushback from different employees or professional, creative kind of professionals who were not so keen about changing the way that they operate or work? Because I personally have experienced some of people that we've had here at IronOrbit and with other customers who did not want to work remote. They insisted actually to come back to office and take their teams back to office. And it was a kind of conflict that we had to step in and resolve at a certain point in time. It's probably against human nature. So what's your take on this, Mike?
Well, we had, before the pandemic, we had a lot of team leaders, I don't know, that just did not want to have their people at home. They were so used to having people in the office, but we're already going down the telecommuter path anyway. We were getting there because we have certain needs where we can't find the talent in our markets. So we'd have to hire somebody from Georgia, or we'd have to hire them from Texas or Phoenix, and we don't have that. So we were already going down that path. And we had already set all that up, and it was mainly for talent acquisition more than anything. But we had people moving away and were going to quit, and they let some people quit and go get a different job because the manager did not want to have that person working remotely. And I talked to, and I know them quite well, the people that had these opinions, because I talked to them beforehand, and their mind is completely changed now. And I think as a culture, our company has changed from, I want my people here, I want to go smell them and see them sitting there and stuff like that, to, well, they're getting a lot more done now when they're working at home.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me about it. So we also one of the companies who shifted completely remotely, and we are a service company. Obviously, it wasn't easy for us to take a call center and take a support engineers and multiple layers. It's a very, very kind of meshed in kind of ecosystem that we run over here, and then take everyone and send them home and ask them to work and operate and support our customers from home. It wasn't really easy. So, and I could sense the same was happening with a lot of our customers, some of the customers that we had. But then, a few weeks later, a month into the pandemic, second month, people were very efficient. They were productive. They were enjoying what they're doing. They had more time on their hands. We gave back. We literally gave back hours to everybody's life that they could go out and do other things about rather than driving back and forth to the office. So it proved to be very actually efficient, to the point where we decided to remain remote forever after. And it's been good since then.
And we're changing. I was going to say, we're changing the way we're structuring leases now, that we're not even looking at 5-year leases. And if we are, we're writing in it, if a landlord says you will sign a 5-year lease, we're putting language in there that we will buy out the lease at any time at this amount. And it's clearly structured, because I don't know what our offices are going to be. I don't know that we have a Duluth office in northern Minnesota that it's about 20 people, but there's only about 2 people in the office now. We don't need that space. We don't need to pay, $20 a square foot or whatever we're paying for that office now. And we're not going to sign another lease because we don't know if we're ever getting those people back. So I think some of that's changed in our industry too.
The other thing that's interesting to hear people talk about that, I think we've been many of us have been aware of for a long time, is talent acquisition. It's no longer is your pool of potential employee candidates in your immediate area. You can go out and look for the best of the best for whatever it is that you do in your specialization area, and offer them the fact that they can stay right where they are. They can work with you. You'll provide them the resources they need to do everything remotely.
I'm enjoying working from home, but I miss waking up in the morning and dressing up properly and then driving to office every now and then. It just hits me, But again, it's the new reality that we have to live with. You gentlemen have actually touched a little bit on the economic impact of this particular industry, and that made me actually go back to one of the notes that I had here. Gartner reported, and that was before the pandemic, by the way, that AEC employees are most focused on possible changes in the economic cycle. They even reported that 36% indicate a high degree of focus on these changes. And again, this data was collected before the pandemic. And Mike, you were saying that there's a lead time. There's almost 2 years between when the crisis hit and when the effects of that crisis, of the damage, actually does the ripple effect, or whatever you want to call it, hits the industry in particular. But then, taking this and coupling it with the fact that there's a $2 trillion bill being discussed as we speak right now, specifically for infrastructure overhauling, and obviously that $2 trillion will be spent over the next, I would say, maybe decade. It's going to take some time actually for these projects to get delivered and concluded if the bill passes. Do you think that if this thing happens, if this bill actually passes and gets into being executed, do you think that's going to help kind of wash away the impact of this pandemic?
I think some of it will, because we had the shovel-ready stuff in 2010, 11, 12, something like that. Same, not the exact same sort of bill, but a very similar bill that came through where there was a lot of money pushed back for, I think they actually called it shovel-ready projects. So we were able to get some of that funding, get some of those projects, and keep things going. So there is a little light there. We just don't know how much it's going to trickle down to us. There's a lot of people competing for all that money, so there will be some challenges there. When we went through it several years ago, people were basically selling services for less than it even cost them to sell, just to get work. So if we end up in a situation like that, we can't sell our services at a loss.
That's very interesting. I personally had high hopes on that particular bill. I thought it's going to have a tremendous impact on the industry, and it's going to probably catapult what we're doing right now and multiply it by because eventually you would want to deliver these projects, and you would want the whole the support of the private sector in particular to go and step in and step up the game. Tyler, how well positioned are you to scale up? Scalability happens to be an ever growing need, right? Everywhere you look, one of the questions that keeps coming up every conversation that you're on, one of the questions that keeps coming up is, how ready are you to scale up or scale down or scale out if you need to, whether on a system level or on an application level, on an infrastructure level, doesn't matter. Even on the talent. Now, obviously on the talent, we're just talking that one of the, I would say benefits, but one of the good things that happened by working remote is that you're not restricted with a talent pool around where your office is at right now. You can hire people from everywhere. But how about the systems? How about the platforms? How about the applications? How good are you in scaling up? Because I'm imagining that, if this administration is very serious about this bill and it passes through and they want to go full force and starting executing and ramping up these projects, you guys will have to scale up, right?
Yeah.
So
I foresee a lot of acquisitions happening, not just for our company, but in general, because of just what what happened in the past year. I mean, I think everyone kind of sees that. But so in that regard, scaling up, we're ready for that, and we have a team that's dedicated for those kinds of things, and we're ready to go kind of wherever fits, of course, with our culture and then our economic or where we're looking. I also see a shift in, I think, engineering services in general on what they focus on instead of just traditional engineering services. I see a more digital focus on creating that additional segment to whatever their business model is to try to sell digital services, whatever that happens to be. I just think that's going to be a bigger shift in our industry because traditional, like as you said, Mike said, it's a race to the bottom in engineering services. Who can offer the lowest price in services, especially if you're in the public sector, right? That's kind of their deal. So I think just where that model goes and kind of you'll see which engineering service companies get to that market first and which are the innovators, and I think you'll kind of see that shift happen very quickly. But
that's also a very interesting observation. Jay, do you hear us?
Yes.
Awesome, perfect. So Jay, what are your thoughts on this as well? I'd like to hear your observations. I know that recently you guys have been involved in numerous projects, the latest of which is the Van Winkle Stadium in Lambert Field. So the question here is, you do a lot of consulting, you do a lot of specifically, in construction and in engineering. So what's your thought on this? What do you think this infrastructure bill or the economic impacts of this would have on your operations or projects going forward?
Well, I don't really know a whole lot about that as far as our company goes, but I've actually got the CEO of our company here with me. I'm going to ask him to take that question.
That's actually an honor.
Yeah, hi. My name is Wade DeBoo. I'm the president of our company here. We're not a huge company. We're spread out quite a bit over a large region. We've got about 125 employees, but I've been thinking a lot about the impact of the potential stimulus bill. Certainly, it could go a lot of different ways. Some of the reports say a lot of the money won't necessarily go to bridges and roads, but even a small percentage of $2 trillion is still a pretty big money that could get funneled to heavy civil infrastructure. Even the stimulus money that was passed here recently, we're hearing that a lot of that is trickling into our states that we're operating in. And so I think I'm pretty optimistic about kind of the short-term impact it might have on our business in the next few years. And if they pass another infrastructure bill, I think that could be further help. There's always some concern, in the long run, what that's going to do 5 or 10 years down the road when that money has to be paid back, or if interest rates go up, there could be some trick in kind of unraveling that extra spending. But I guess that's for our future selves to worry about at this point. That's kind of just some really high-level thoughts that I've been thinking about here recently.
And Wade, let me welcome you actually for joining us over, and thank you actually for taking a moment here to answer this question. It's pretty exciting to have you on this as well. Some of the projects that you guys have also kind of delivered is the Great Falls Water Treatment Plant, which is pretty much a water treatment project for the American, and then I think it's in Montana, right?
Yeah.
Or actually, yeah. And then the other project was specifically for the Briar Cliff Fire Station. So, I mean, to me, these appears to be projects that are kind of resilient to any pandemic, right? In terms of the nature of the projects and the importance of these projects. So, how resilient was your business to the pandemic? Shedding the light on this, and how are you guys been able to kind of navigate through this particular crisis?
We did fairly well. We, especially in Montana, I don't think there was a huge hit to our operations here. We do have, you've mentioned that one project in Pennsylvania. Our Pennsylvania office was hit a lot harder. Things were locked down, a lot more strict there. And in Washington State, we have an office there that was impacted more as well. But like you say, those bigger infrastructure projects, a lot of times they can take 5 or more years, sometimes 10 years to kind of work their way through. So the funding on those kinds of projects had been in place and the planning long before the pandemic, and there was enough momentum to carry those through. So, the pandemic, there's always a lag where some disruption in the economy, especially in Montana. We're kind of usually a couple of years behind the national trends here. So there's always that concern if the national economy struggles in one year, then a couple of years later, pretty often we're feeling it here. This one feels a little bit different because I think there is some migration from a population out of the big cities into more rural areas, and we're seeing a ton of development pressure right now. Real estate prices are going up pretty significantly here in our region, which is driving a lot of development. We're just seeing lots and lots of development pressure, which is good for our business. We do a lot of land development work.
That's a very interesting observation, actually. I'd love to get to Montana and leave California. It's been a killer over here, the cost of living and all that. So that's a very, very interesting observation here. Actually, speaking of such, Gartner reports 87% of HR leaders expect to reduce costs this next year. To find savings, 64% plan to lean on existing technology to improve processes, while 43% anticipate making new technology investments to make their teams more efficient. Now, gentlemen, did your HR department talk to you yet or not?
Not here.
Not here. So no pressure so far on introducing more processes or technology or artificial intelligence to reduce the costs even further? Nothing so far?
We haven't seen anything significant changes on that part here. I know there's a lot of businesses out there who are trying to help streamline that. And, we run a pretty efficient HR department in our company already, so I don't know how much streamlining we can do from here, but it's probably technology that could help towards that, I suppose.
One thing that's interesting, related to exactly what you said. You mentioned AI and things like that. It's interesting seeing customers who have made investments in the data center and started moving all of their resources to the data center, and then sort of the next stage in that is starting to look at some of those things. Hey, we have all of this compute power, all this horsepower in our data center. How can we leverage that for our business in, say, off hours? You've got desktops running on your GPUs and your servers during the day, and at night when your users aren't leveraging them, how can those be repurposed? How can you use them to run other workloads, other types of compute, rendering jobs, things like that that would take up time during the day? That starts to become a really interesting discussion.
And Jimmy, what would you do in such a situation? You come from this industry, you spent some time running these systems. So tell me your solution for this.
I mean, it's so. I mean, the biggest thing is that it's fully capable of that today. I mean, you can absolutely do that. The only piece that is sort of missing right now is a sort of centralized management platform. How do you automate that type of process? Which there really isn't a way to do that yet. I mean, part of the benefit of vGPU is the ability to reconfigure your setup at a moment's notice. You can shut down your VMs, change the resources allocated to them, bring them back up in a different configuration to do a different job. So it's fully capable of doing that today on a sort of manual level. But I think that because the industry hasn't sort of adopted or determined a killer use case that everybody faces, which I don't know that they'll get to, because I believe AI is unique to your business. That's really what the special sauce is. But having an automated process that can control those things and do it sort of automatically is the only thing that's missing.
I have a question here of what does digital transformation mean to you? Before we pop up the question, there's an observation that we came across from geospatial market research for the AEC industry in particular. They reported that digitalization in building infrastructure may save up to 10-20% of resources involved in the construction workflow. Project time saving might reach 14% just by adopting digitalization or digital transformation. And I know that you, Jimmy, have worked a lot on this in the past, and you've had some very key insights to share with the audience over here. So what's your take on this?
Yeah, so first I'll throw in a shameless plug for our GTC conference that's coming up in a week here, mainly because one of the key sessions is literally called Digital Transformation is Here, Augmenting Human Capacity with Exponential Compute. It's going to be presented by Amy Bunzel from Autodesk. So she's very familiar with the challenges facing the industry. Has some really good insight usually. But I mean, I think a lot of what is what's difficult when it comes to digital transformation in the AEC space is that, I mean, it's based on a lot of really antiquated processes. We design these really beautiful 3D models that typically end up serving a different purpose than what they're there for, which is building from them. A lot of discussion in more in the manufacturing space right now, but I think that AEC is starting to get into it, is the concept of digital twins. And digital twins is really, how do you take this digital model and literally make it a representation, a digital representation of the real physical thing? And it's something that I think the industry has sort of struggled with. We've seen incremental steps to start to move towards it. Hopefully some of the software and hardware solutions being put into place will make this a little bit more real. I mean, part of it is just when you start modeling.
What is the process now, Jimmy? How do you? So right now you do these 3D models.
Yeah.
How do you share them with your customer? What do you do now?
So I mean, a lot of it is printing them out to dumb old documents. Believe it or not, it's whether a digital document or a physical document. It's 2D. It's paperwork. It's simple deliverables. Not necessarily.
What's missing here? Why? What's missing? The application is not there to support the technology.
Yeah, it's a function. It's a function of really a few things. So I mean, first is just cultural. It's been sort of, that's the way people have done it. So why change it? Unfortunately, that's a mindset. But then there is sort of difficulty from a technological and software perspective. I mean, when you're talking full blown digital twin, we're talking about modeling down to like the screws and bolts. And when you start modeling to that level, you are, increasing file sizes exponentially. You're making it harder for, multiple people to work on that individual project because typically different people touch those different aspects. You might have someone who's modeling the landscape, someone who's modeling the structure, and someone who's modeling the interior. And they typically don't play well together. So how do you get all those things into one model to work together? So yeah, I mean, there's a few different challenges in place there, but I think that we're working towards a better solution. Obviously, hardware is getting better and better every day. I mean, I can tell you that I have customers doing this today with pretty large things. You'd be surprised at the amount of screws and bolts that go into like vehicles and things like that, and those are definitely being built into digital twin type configurations. Software like our Omniverse platform that we're working on, which is in beta now. Some of that is aiming to solve it. So I mean, it's really a holistic approach. It's culture, technology, and just getting people to do things in a different way.
And these are definitely interesting topics that we would like to host you for and shed the light on in future episodes over here, Jimmy. And on that particular bombshell that was just dropped by Jimmy, I would go ahead and thank you all for participating in our inaugural AEC Roundtable discussion today. We really hope that this was as informative, with the information that we presented here, and makes your life a bit easier when it comes to your firm navigating, the months and years ahead. Going forward, are there any topics that you guys would like us to discuss, or questions that you would like us to raise and invite other minds into the conversations on future episodes? If you think of any, please let us know. Following this session today, you're going to get an email, obviously, with a survey. Would highly appreciate your value over here, or actually your feedback. It's very valuable to us to navigate or to take this forward as a platform. You'll also get a copy of this recording that we've had over here. For the next episode, what's on our mind? It's been pretty much around the impact of AI, specifically around accelerating true digital transformations. Does your firm have the data foundation to deploy AI at a scale? And actually, if you are to do so, what is the typical roadmap to get there, to adopt this particular technology and kind of integrate it with your existing environment? So, Jimmy, thank you for joining us today. Mike, Tyler, Jay, Wade, thank you as well for chipping in over here. John Reynolds, thank you for joining. Right after this, we're going to also have in the email that's going to go out, we're going to send you the link to registering for the Nvidia pretty much up this coming week. And there are a lot of very interesting kind of keynotes happening at that particular event. So I would recommend everyone to take, kind of reserve some time to jump in and see, check it out. Thanks again. We'll talk to you soon, hopefully, and till we meet in other episodes.